Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Hacking Your Leadership Author podcast in our new series that we're doing. We're extremely excited. We've had so many great interviews and great conversations with some amazing leaders who also happen to be leadership authors. And as we've said, Chris and I have done a lot of put a lot of time and effort into making sure that we're vetting some of our guests that we feel really great about their content. So, as always, we will ask you to not only enjoy the show, but please click on the links in the podcast show notes. Check out their content, buy their books, subscribe to their podcasts and newsletters, because we're taking a lot of great inspiration from the content here. And today, we're extremely excited to talk to Phil Geldart, the founder and CEO of Eagles Flight, which is a recognized authority in the areas of transforming organizational culture, leadership development, and experiential training solutions. So again, these are all things that speak to our heart, and we just want to say welcome to the show, Phil.
Hey, Lorenzo. Thank you. It's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? It's a lot. Hey, you've deserved it, though. A lot of work that you've done here, which is absolutely amazing.
Thanks.
We're going to spend today talking about Phil's book here, Leading What Matters Most. And what I will tell you, I love this because this is a way of talking about leadership that I have quite honestly not seen in this type of a platform before. It's a full book around leadership development through a story that's being explained, and it's like a fiction work here. But the way that it tracks in the book and the things that are spoken about obviously come from real life experience. You can just tell in reading it that these things really hit home in some spaces there. But maybe, Phil, can you just talk to us a little bit about why this approach to this leadership book?
Yeah, great, Lorenzo. I'm happy to do that. Thanks a lot for having me. I think there's a lot of books on leadership. In fact, I've written a few myself that tend to be more like manuals or case studies. And I feel that the real challenge, if you're trying to be a great leader, is okay, but what do I do in practice? I get the theory, I get you've given me the recommendations, and I know what other people do. But I honestly feel that leaders wrestle with the day to day, but what do I do differently? And so I thought, trying to put it into the context of a story, so you could identify with the main character. You go, okay, I could do that, or I could do that. That's not that complicated. So I chose that approach to try to help the reader feel like they could implement it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I love it because I think that, to your point, a lot of times as I consume, books, audiobooks, media, TED Talks, whatever we might have out there, sometimes it can feel very theoretical. And as you're reading and consuming it, you're thinking about, well, what does that do? How does that look? Does that make sense to me? Versus a read like this, which is like a story. And now I feel like I'm a part of this journey, and I'm asking the same questions that the character's asking, and I'm looking for the same solutions. And it was a very different experience from somebody who's consuming the content for me.
Yeah. Well, let me give you an example. Right early in the book, Bridget, who's my fictional CEO, wants to make a transformation, and she chats with a consultant, and the consultant says, okay, well, how committed are you? And she says, oh, I'm committed. He said, but how committed are you really? She said, well, what do you mean? And he begins to say to her, well, you have to make sure your executive team are on board. And she says, well, what does that mean? So then he says, well, if they're not on board, you got to be willing to let them go. And she says, what? Let them go. So they have this dialogue. And I feel, very often we talk about, well, the senior management needs to be committed to the outcome. Everybody nods sagely, but they don't appreciate that to be committed to an outcome, to transform an organization, is an all or nothing commitment. You have to model it. You have to be there front and center. You have to use the language. And so in trying to explain that to her, she begins to understand in practice what it means to have senior management commitment. And then I'm hoping that the reader would say, okay, I can make a decision for myself. How committed am I to this transformation? So it allowed me to bring to life the real practicalities of what it would take to make change.
Yeah, and I love that. In a recent interview, you talked about this idea of hey, if I'm being asked to make a change, if I want to have some trust established here and making change, is my boss doing this, right? Is their boss doing this? And it kind of goes all the way up that way.
Yeah.
And I love that, like how you broke that down, because that's the important thing. Is like if you're asking people to go through a change, how are you working yourself to the change curve? How are you as the leader role modeling these types of behaviors? And then can you honestly put your hand up and say that, and say like, no, I am doing the things that I know I'm asking my people to do, and I'm showing them that I'm flexible, that I'm learning agile. Am I sharing with them maybe even my emotions or my thoughts in going through this change as a means of being transparent with my feelings so that they can kind of align with me? So I love that you kind of brought that up. Did that come from kind of experience going into the book, or is this something that as you were writing the book, you kind of uncovered this nugget that you wanted to highlight?
No, I've known this for a long time. We've done a lot of culture transformations, and I mean, I say we, Eagles Flight, the company that I lead. The the big issue is very often helping senior management understanding their role in the journey. So
Mm.
I've had to go through the discussions that consultant had with Bridget many times.
Mm.
And I think, you put your finger though on a critical point that,
Mm.
if I could just elaborate for a bit, if I'm coming to work and I'm working in a warehouse and
Mm.
I'm moving the boxes, my supervisor is maybe like 3 years older than me and had the
Mm.
job before I did. But as far as I am concerned, that supervisor is my leader and he represents the company, or she.
Mm.
I may never get to see the CEO and the executives who are really committed to the transformation. I look at my immediate boss. What is she doing? And what she does, I do. So I model on her. And if I'm having trouble, I look for her to come and say, okay, here's what you need to do differently. So she's got to be there to coach me. So this idea of the leader having to set the example and to also be skilled to coach me to follow that example puts huge pressure on the organization to then train that supervisor. And I think that very often organizations don't fully understand that your frontline leaders are generally not trained to do this kind of thing. They're trained to be good on process, they're good on policy, they're good on dealing with customers, they deal with their functional area well. But you have to start right at the most senior level and say, what do I want you to do or do differently in order to demonstrate the behavior we want everybody to do?
Mhm.
And you've got to cascade that all the way
Yeah.
down. And it's a lot of work. But if you get it right, then you know that every leader is actually able to model on their own leader. And so you begin to see that behavior change. So your point is critical. I'm just not sure most organizations understand what it takes to do it.
Yeah, no, I love that, because I've always believed in the same thing as like the kind of the impact of your day to day is really your experience at work is really impacted by two levels above: your boss and your boss's boss. Like, to your
Right.
point, right? That is 95% of what
Yep.
you experience.
That's right.
So if you look at it that way, then they really become the manifestation of the organization's values and structure and expectations, and all the things come to life for that person in those two levels of leadership. So that's extremely important. I love that you highlight that, and you kind of walk through that. And then I think, to your point, it's like, I think a lot of organizations and leaders in organizations understand that concept, and they would say, Phil, 100% you're right. And then the next question is, how do I do it? And then how do I build work systems where I can validate that it's actually happening? Right.
Yeah.
And I think what I liked about the book is that there's kind of like this flow of not just the here's the question, here's the answer, but then here's the work. Here's the issue. Something else. There's another thing that popped in here that's a problem. And then I love even like at the line where it was like towards the end of the book, and no spoiler alerts here, but hey, there's an issue and we're on top of it. And I think her response was like, I know you are. Like, we've gone through this full journey now where we've built this element of confidence and capability at the same time, which I think is so apparent in there. But I think also, as you've done this over the years and as you've discovered this as the thing, maybe what is that first thing that you would say to a leader who is trying to have the same journey that you've got in the book here?
Yeah. I know this is not going to be your typical answer, but the very most important thing is to sit with the leadership, and I mean at every level, and say, you have responsibility for the lives and careers and performance of human beings.
Mm,
They're adults. They leave your job, and they're on boards and committees, and they're raising families, and you are the one that in their job life they look to you, and you have this tremendous potential that you can lead and nurture. And I try to help leaders understand that leadership is begins with valuing the potential in every human being. If you simply
mm,
treat the person for, all right, I pay them to do this job, and they do the job, even if they do it well, you forget the fact they could do a lot more. I mean, in 5 years, they're probably going to be a manager, and then 5 years later, that they're going to be a director. They have that potential. So leadership begins with saying, my job is to release that potential.
mhm,
And that is actually not 100% altruistic. If you go to a board and say, okay, what am I paying you to be a leader? I mean, how much do I pay you? How much am I paying my leaders? And how much am I paying my employees? Are you getting the best out of them? Because if you're not, then why aren't you?
mhm,
Because I'm paying the salaries, I expect the very best. But many leaders say, well, firstly, that's a foreign concept. I'm being paid to release human potential.
mhm.
And secondly, I have no idea how to do it. But Lorenzo, it's
Yeah.
interesting. If you think of the best leaders you've ever worked for, you perform better, right? They,
Mhm.
they get the best out of you. So,
Yep. Yep.
okay, I got to be like one of those people. I want to be a best leader
Mm,
because I know for myself I perform better for a great
mm,
leader. So that then makes it much easier to go to an organization and say, okay, we've codified what makes a great leader. We will teach them. You got to make sure that they apply what we teach.
I love that, Phil. And I want to go deeper into this concept of releasing human potential. But
Okay.
first, I want to give it up for a few of our sponsors. Okay, so welcome back. We're talking to Phil here, and I want to dive deeper into this idea of releasing human potential. And you kind of were talking about this before the break, but as you explain this concept and the importance of it, which I completely agree with, and maybe people say they want to, but then their actions don't show you that they're going to do it. I would love to know more about that. Like, do you feel that's an element of not wanting to give up control? Is it ego? Is it protecting opportunities because they feel that others, when empowered and emboldened, may be able to take their role? Like, what do you feel are the things that are stopping some of the leaders from releasing the actual human potential?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think your average listener would immediately jump to, well, they don't want to give up control or it's their
Right.
ego. I don't really think that's it for the
Mm,
majority.
mm,
And let me see if I can paint a mental picture for you.
mm,
Think of a rectangle, vertical
mm,
rectangle, and at the bottom of this, you have me just getting into the job, my first job.
mm,
I'm digging
mm,
ditches out on the construction crew. And then I get promoted. And as I'm moving up that sort of vertical rectangle a little bit, as I get promoted, I got a guy working for me.
mm,
But now I'm operating the backhoe. And then I get promoted again and I'm operating the backhoe, but I'm also doing a little bit of hiring because now I'm a lead hand. But as I progress through my career, I'm moving and keeping being promoted because of my competence functionally. I'm good
mm,
on the road, I'm good with the equipment, I'm good at dealing with the contractors, and I keep getting promoted until ultimately I become a VP of construction or something.
mm,
But if you go back to the base, in my first job, I was all functional, and
mm,
my only interpersonal relationships, I had a beer with the boys at the end of the day.
mm,
By the time I'm kind of like the foreman,
mm,
I'm still 85% functional, but I'm 15%. Really, now I got to kind of deal with a couple of problems when the
mm,
guys are showing up late. So as my career progresses, I move from being primarily functionally driven to being more people centric. And by the time I
mm,
get to a VP, I can't even remember where the key to the backhoe is. And I'm just dealing with people problems all the time.
mm,
But the reason I tell that is because each promotion is based on functional competence. I
mhm,
know how to do stuff with things. So I naturally take those skills and apply them to managing people. I treat
mhm,
people like things, right?
mm.
Because that's my
Yeah.
career. Until ultimately I suddenly realized people aren't things.
Mm,
The way I'm managing them doesn't work anymore. because they're actually, but by then I'm so far into my career, I've not been equipped to manage people differently. So what you
Mm,
see is it's not that I don't value that you have potential. I don't know how to do that. I think of you as a machine.
mm,
It wouldn't be that
yeah.
coarse, but that is really what
Yeah.
it is. And so I'm managing you the only way I know how to manage anything. Well, you do this, you get that output. If it doesn't work, you fix it.
Mm,
As opposed to early in my career, I was taught how to communicate effectively,
mhm,
how to give feedback with respect, how to take feedback and not be offended by it. So, very often when I'm working with an organization, say, look, guys, I appreciate you don't have the skills to release human potential, but it's not malicious. It's not that
mhm,
you don't want it. You've just never wrapped your head around that. So
yeah.
let me help you with that. And they typically
Mm,
say, okay, that's great. And once you see the benefit, Lorenzo,
mm,
once you get the power of the people coming to you and giving you all that they have, you go, man, where has this been all my life?
mhm,
And so they migrate to it. So that the it's more about recognizing the leaders are not poor leaders by intent
mhm,
or by conscious choice. It's by
yeah.
circumstance. And we have to
Mm.
jump in and deal with that deficiency. And most of the time they embrace it and you get the benefit.
Yeah, I love that because as you were talking through it, I imagine in most all jobs and industries, you hire someone to be a specialist and then you teach them how to become that specialist.
Yeah,
And then as they continue, to your point, navigate their career and advance up, they become more specialists at different things. But being a generalist with humans is different than being a generalist when it comes to like
sure.
verticals of specialized things that you have to do there. So you mentioned this earlier in the show, but like that idea of like what are we teaching those at that level to better collaborate, to understand how do you work through and manage through conflict, how do you create spaces of healthy debates, and how do you have them understand that I think to truly be able to empower people, you have to feel empowered yourself. You kind of have to
Absolutely.
you have to experience that
Yes.
in a way that
Well,
allows you to then create the space to make that happen. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
And it's interesting because I'll talk with leaders and they go, okay, Phil, I get it. I get it. I'll master this. And then they get their feedback forms and they go, well, Betty over here thinks I'm great and Fred thinks I'm terrible. How is that possible? I'm the
yeah.
same guy. And I think it's because they do not understand that human beings are different. So
Hmm.
you can't treat them all the same and you can't expect them to all be like you. You, as the leader, have to learn to adapt. And we have in our communication course, we talk about style, fact, and passion. So if
Hmm.
I'm going to deal with somebody, what is their style? How much do they like fact and how much do they like passion? And that formula changes for every human being. So
Hmm.
as a leader, the leader, have to change.
Yeah.
And when I do, then all my feedback forms come back saying I'm great because not because the person has changed, but I have learned to adapt. And I do that because I want to get at the potential. And therefore, I'm willing to make the changes in my behavior that I need to
Hmm.
optimize their contribution.
Yeah, I love that. And you also mentioned this in an interview, and it's kind of this idea that you want to write a book to help organizations leverage the fact that people want to give more. So like this whole thing is baked in. People want to give more. They're looking for reasons to do it. And the organization and the leaders of the organization have to find ways to want them to do that by role modeling that type of thing. But tell me more about that. Like, what do you mean when you're so when you're very confident in knowing that people want to give more?
Yep. Well, most people want job security. Typically, they want either advancement or certainly quality of life, and therefore they want their organization to succeed. So, like, if I'm here, I'm going to work. I'm going to do my best work. If my boss doesn't let me do my best work, I get frustrated, and that's part of the problem. So, I think there's sort of an inherent desire to do well, and that can be killed easily if your boss is a bit of a not supportive. But the moment you work for someone who causes that to flourish, then you jump into that. Now the challenge is a great leader defines the sandbox for the employee. So the sandbox means I will help you determine as much freedom as I can give you where you are not you don't have too much freedom, and therefore you could put something at risk, or you don't have enough freedom and therefore you get frustrated. So let's define your freedom of authority in your job. Someone comes to you to rent a car and the car is not there. Can you give them another car? Can you give them a discount? What's your freedom of authority? And then the person goes, okay, I now know the sandbox that I can play in. I'm not always worried that I'm going to. But my job as a leader, and then you know what? Let's talk about increasing your sandbox. How can I help you grow so you can make more decisions, have a bigger impact? And you see that particularly, especially in the service industry, where you're dealing with clerks, and sometimes they've got no authority, they want to help you, but the organization has not given them the environment that allows that, and you can see how frustrated they are, as opposed to other companies where they're there, they want to help, and their sandbox size has been so well defined, they know what they can do. And as a customer, I think, man, I really like you. I'm coming back here again. But it's the same person. It's just that one organization has done nothing around the sandbox definition, and the other's done a great job at defining it and growing it. And that, I think, is how you get in practice what you're looking for.
Yeah, I love that. I think, there's a lot of articles over the years around Zappos when they first started, and kind of that concept of like whatever it takes to take care of the customer. And yes, we sell shoes. Somebody wanted to order a pizza. We'll figure that out, but like to your point, you know what I mean? Like there's that element. And I was talking to someone else the other day about the idea of the sandbox again. And she had a great analogy. She's like, well, you know that there's going to be sand that's going to spill over into the box next to yours, right? And then real leaders will understand that, and they will help people to like, how do I open a door there? How do we allow some of that sand to flow back and forth as we create partnerships? So that's fantastic. Well, Phil, I really want to thank you for the time. I would love to let the people know, where can they get more information from you? Where should they go to buy the book and buy some of the other books that you've got there? And then the organizations. We have a lot of C-level executives that listen to the show that constantly write into us. How can they contact you around doing some of this work with their organizations?
Wow, great question. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
You can find out about the company through eaglesflight.com. So eagle like the bird, eaglesflight.com. And you can find out about me at philgeldart.com. But if you go to eaglesflight.com, you'll find me. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. Again, I really appreciate it. And again, we ask all of our listeners to please click the links, check it out, get the content. I know if you're listening to our show, as you have for a lot of years, you are pouring into your own development. And books like this, concepts like this, partners like this that can help you and help your business get better are why we exist and why we do this show. So again, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Phil, for the time. We're going to continue this dialogue on our Pillars and Pitfalls series here over at lionsguideacademy.com. We'll talk to you all next time.
Take care. Bye now.